Okay, good morning, everyone. It is Thursday, April 15th, 2021. My name is Myrna Molina. It being 9 a.m., I'd like to call the Judicial and Public Safety Committee to order. First item on the agenda would be roll call.
Brown,
Here.
Gums,
Gums here.
Leonard,
Leonard here.
Sanchez,
Here.
Chepro, Davist,
Davist here.
Molina.
Molina present.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Next item on the agenda would be approval of the minutes for the March 11th, 2021 meeting. May I have a motion and a second?
Gums will move.
Moose.
Mr. Leonard moves, Ms. Gums seconds. Any questions or comments regarding the minutes? Okay, hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Brown,
Yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Davist,
Davist, yes.
Molina.
Molina, yes. Thank you. Okay, next item on our agenda would be public comment. We didn't have anybody signed up to speak. Is anybody here with public comment today? Okay, seeing none and hearing none, we'll move on. Our judiciary financial reports are on file. And then we will go on to our CANECOM. Ms. Guthrie, good morning.
Good morning. It is National Telecommunicator Week, so we are enjoying celebrating our staff. Each of our days this week has a theme, and we're enjoying all the recognition that comes with National Telecommunicator Week. It's important to celebrate the important work that they do every day, and we look forward to this week every year. Other than that, we have a number of projects that continue to go on. Our new radio consoles were installed within CANECOM, and I'm thrilled to report that we will be getting new furniture and kind of a new layout at no expense to CANECOM next month. And the way we were able to fund that is through Access ETSB revenue that was available to CANECOM. We had a little extra that we didn't expect to receive at the end of last year. So we're able to use those funds to put in, new furniture consoles for our team. The current consoles that we have were purchased in 2006. They've worn very well. We're going with the same vendor that we have because we're actually able to reuse some metal partitions, and that help control the cost as well. So it's a nice little lift for our team, and we will be working on prepping for that probably for the next month. That furniture is set to arrive the week of May 17th. Just a quick note about our reports that are on file. If you look at our call for service activity report for March, it does show a significant increase in calls for service. I just want to note that significant increase is actually related to COVID-19 from last year. So it was in 2020 in March that we saw a significant decrease, and the calls for service that are noted on here are trending normal with how we would do in March for the past 5-year trends. And that's all I have this morning.
Thank you. Any comments or questions regarding her report?
Madam Chair, Gums.
Ms. Gums, please go ahead.
I just want to celebrate National Telecommunicator Week. I know it's an extremely important job. I want to thank everybody for picking up that phone. Often people don't recognize dispatchers unless they've done something wrong, but they're arguably one of the most important jobs that we have in the county and across the nation. So thank you all for your service.
Thank you so much.
Okay, agreed. Okay, next item on our agenda is our Sheriff's Adult Corrections.
Good morning. Under Sheriff Gangler here on behalf of Sheriff Hain. He was not able to attend. Our report should be on file. We also want to highlight the work of our telecommunicators. They're behind the scenes so often and people don't get to see them, but they're so vital to everything we do in our emergency responses, and just want to thank them for all their service over these years. I've been here 25 years, and there's some of the most hardworking, dedicated employees I've seen here at the county over my time.
Thank you.
I think that's all we have.
Thank you. Any comments or questions regarding the Sheriff's monthly report? Okay, hearing and seeing none, we'll move on to our State's Attorney. Is Ms. Mosser here or anybody from the State's Attorney? All right, it's going to be a short meeting today. Okay, so her report is on file. If anybody has any questions, you can reach out to her. Next item on our agenda is our Public Defender.
Thank you. Good morning.
Our report is on file. Just a couple of things. I want to say that with the help of the sheriff, our office is almost fully totally vaccinated at this point. So we are very excited and happy about that. We continue to work through the cases, the backlog that we've had from COVID, and we are seeing some movement in that. So we are very excited about that with the help of the judges and getting cases set for trial now, and working with the state's attorney in offers that enable us to close some of the cases. We are making some movement, so we're happy to report that. That is all in regards to our monthly report. I do have the resolution.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and ask for a motion and a second to discuss the resolution authorizing the establishment of the Public Defender's Office of Abuse and Neglect attorney position.
Leonard moves.
Brown seconds.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Ms. Cohen, if you go ahead and introduce.
Thank you. Last month, I did present my presentation in regards to our office as a whole. And in that presentation, I talked about things that we needed and things that we would like to have. The abuse and neglect position is something that I feel that we do need in our office. And in relation to that presentation, just a little bit of a reminder of the numbers. We were from 2018 to 2020, we have seen a 76% increase in our caseload for the abuse and neglect courtroom. We were at 218 cases in 2020. Those are cases that our office opened and that we were appointed to. In that courtroom, as a reminder again, we currently only have one designated attorney for that courtroom. She is responsible for handling all of those cases, which involve multiple children, usually for each case, as well as hundreds of pages of documents to read and multiple agencies to discuss the case with. Because we only have one person, she is on almost the majority of the cases in that courtroom, so she does not get any lag time in between cases to help her catch up. And at this point, for effective representation of our clients and for the good of the county as a whole to help move all of these cases forward, we believe that we do need this position to add a second person there. In the resolution, I am asking, it would be entry-level salary. I do have someone in mind who could move into that position in the office, who has the experience to be able to handle that position. And then this salary rate would allow me to hire in then a new attorney to fill his spot.
Thank you. Any comments or questions regarding the resolution? Okay, wonderful. Mr. Sanchez, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is, the money for this is coming from the Special Reserve Fund, the savings from the COVID-19 that we got from the CARES Act?
Yes, I spoke to Mr. Anzik, and that was his best suggestion for me.
Going forward, since that's kind of like a one-time funding source, is there a plan for retaining this position going forward with other money?
It is my understanding from Mr. Anzik that this would enable us for a couple of years. And then I am working with the state's attorney. We are working on ways to be able to fund these positions going forward out 5 years, 10 years, and into the future.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Sanchez, I wanted to point out to you that with the additional rescue money that we will be receiving, I had proposed that we consider taking that amount and dividing it over 10 years. The purpose of that was in order to fund these needed programs. And if we took that amount over a 10-year period, that would give us an additional $10 million a year to fund any additional needs that we have, be it payroll or whatever. Madam Chair brought up the point that what do we do in 10 years? After that money's gone, which is a very valid point. However, I think giving ourselves 10 years to figure that out is better than 2 or 3 years. So that would be my hope, that we could fund these needed additions and changes for up to 10 years with this new money coming in.
Okay, thank you. And I think this is going to be an ongoing conversation, as Mr. Leonard said, regarding the funding of all these, not just positions, but infrastructure, labor, physical infrastructure, technological infrastructure. So we'll just keep having these conversations and hopefully getting our community what they need. Okay, with no further comments or questions, I'd like to go ahead and take the roll on this resolution.
Brown,
Yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Davist,
It's for the kids. Davis, yes.
Molina.
Molina, yes, and this will move on to our Finance Committee later on this month. Okay, if it's okay, I'd like to go and go back to our state's attorney, Ms. Mosser. Good morning.
Good morning. Sorry for being late today. We have our financials on file, and I don't have a report outside of echoing what Ms. Conant has said, in that we are working really well together to move cases. So our case numbers are going down. We're taking more cases to trial, and we're resolving more cases. So I know that that has become a breath of fresh air for most of the attorneys and support staff, because they're starting to see movement. The other thing that my staff has asked me to extend to JPS is a big thank you recently for the beginning part, and then that ultimately approval of the additional funds to the state's attorney's office. They are very excited to see that they have board support. They're very excited to see the new people that we're going to have at the office, which is just going to, again, pass out more of the work. And they wanted me to say thank you to all of you for listening and really being the driving force behind all of this. So thank you.
Mr. Leonard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to comment on the state's attorney's office, and specifically the state's attorney. If we all remember, initially there was a request for about $3.4 million. The state's attorney, in her wisdom, realized that although she would like to have all those things, we probably couldn't afford it. She readjusted that ask to around $1 million. And that made it very feasible for us to handle this. So I want to thank her for her efforts to try to work with the county, because our finances are somewhat tight, and she did a great job. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Davis with a follow-up comment.
Mr. Davis, go ahead.
Bill, you're absolutely right. And Jamie, great work. I know you and I have intended to have a conversation about this, but since we are in an open meeting, I want to continue to plant the seed about what I perceive as a need, not just a want, for a neutral exchange site, because it is about the kids. And that's a feature that has been lacking that we really could use. So let's just keep that in our minds as we move forward. That was it.
Absolutely, and you are so correct about that. Just the sheer amount of cases that would lessen, but more importantly, to have a child not witness the animosity between parents, even if it's not resulting in some sort of physical violence, that verbal abuse that the children see, that's what increases the cycle of violence and just the trauma that kids suffer. So whatever I can do to join in that mission, I'm more than willing.
You have to help parents that are fighting stop poisoning the well. It's really it is a vicious cycle. So.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Yep.
Okay, seeing no other comments or questions, we'll move on to our judiciary and courts. Judge Hull couldn't be here today, but I'm not sure if somebody else is here. Okay.
Morning, Andrea O'Brien for the judiciary. Yes, Judge Hull does apologize he couldn't be here this morning. We have nothing to report, but if anyone has any questions, please let me know.
Okay, no questions at this time. So we will go on to our Court Services Administration. Good morning, Ms. Ost.
Good morning. I don't have any resolutions in front of you this morning, but I did bring a director, Emily Saylor, who's going to present on the drug court as part of our continuing informational presentation to you guys. And I will congratulate myself for having great timing that I'm not competing with Sheriff Hain this morning. It's very exciting. So I'm going to introduce Emily Saylor. She's a director in probation. She's over all of the specialty courts as well as some of the adult probation functions.
Hello.
Hey, good morning, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I will try to keep it quick since everyone's ready for a quick meeting, so I won't try to go too long. With the problem-solving courts, and I'm going to try to talk about all three of them. Many of you I have seen at graduations, and you've been around for the problem-solving courts. I'm trying to give you a little bit of insight into what we do day to day from the probation piece of that. And so the hope is that once we kind of get through this, you'll just have a better understanding of the day-to-day work, not just those graduations. So Kane County has three problem-solving courts. We have our adult drug court program, we have our treatment alternative court program, which is our mental health court, and then we have our veterans court. Each of those programs, there is a process that we go through to get people involved in applying for the programs. And while each program is unique, there's a lot of similarities to that. So each of our courts is required to be certified by the Illinois Supreme Court. The state came out with standards a few years ago that required all operating courts within the state to adhere to certain standards. So there was an application process that each of our courts went through, and there was in-person interviews that took place and then observation of the courts to make sure we were adhering to that. I am pleased to announce that all three of our courts have been certified, and they will be continue to stay certified for up to 3 years, at which time we'll go through a recertification process. So some of the things that we look at in addition to the state requirements for somebody coming into the program is that applicants have to want to be part of the program. I think that's probably one of those, the want and the ready are two entirely different things. And so what we try to do on our end is really make sure that they want it. We then help them get ready for it. And so when you look at the intensity of what these courts are, that readiness is a huge piece that we try to focus on. The other thing that we really want to make sure is that the applicants are residents of Kane County. We have a lot of resources in Kane County, a lot of support from the individuals from the board, from all over the treatment agencies, community representatives, and we want to make sure that those resources are going to the residents of Kane County. So during that application process, we're really making sure that we have an idea that there are ties to the county. This is probably self-explanatory. Treatment is mandatory. These are our treatment courts, our problem-solving courts. Treatment is a huge component of that. So all three courts do require a need for treatment. As long as an individual expresses that they're ready to begin that treatment, again, want to begin that treatment and then ready to begin that treatment, we're going to make sure that they get those resources. It's a team-based approach. I think this is the most unique piece of this, and I think this is part of why these courts are so different than regular probation, is this team approach. We have the judiciary, the state's attorney, the public defender, all of these individuals that are working around for a certain person. And when you work with these individuals and after they get into the program, you really start to see that relationship with the attorney or with the judge is different than anything that they've experienced before. And that's kind of, I think, what makes these courts unique. And studies have shown what really kind of sets them apart from the regular probation caseloads that we have. In addition to who I listed, there was the Veterans Treatment Commission that also sits on those teams, and then our local treatment providers. You're good. Thank you. So let me talk real quick about our drug court program. I think this is probably the most well-known program. It's our largest program that we have. From 2020, we talk a lot about how COVID played a huge impact on these courts, and it absolutely, you see that through our courts. One of the highlights for drug court for 2020 is the 3-year federal grant that they received, a total of $500,000. What I want to really kind of point out is that this is the 3rd consecutive federal grant that our drug court has received. So over the last 11 years, we have received funding from the federal grant in order to help support the program, which has been a huge advantage to the individuals that are part of drug court, and really allows us to really focus on the treatment piece of that. So I want the kudos to the court, because there is a process and a review that the court goes through from the federal when they're looking at the grant. So to be given 3 consecutive grants is a huge accomplishment. So I just want to kind of highlight that. The capacity is 125. Right now, the drug court has about 65 individuals in the program. I know that doesn't sound like a whole lot, but we do have to take into account 2020. So as I go through just some of the other courts briefly, we are seeing about a 50% decrease in applications last year alone in comparison to the other years that we've had. I think that obviously COVID played a huge impact in that. As you've probably heard with, articles and studies that have come out over the last year, mental health and drug addiction have really COVID has really increased that. And so we fully anticipate that over the rest of this year and next year, we're going to see an increase in applications that come in. But like I said, we do have the capacity for 125 in the drug court program. There's an assessment process that everyone goes through, and this is for all of the courts. So I'll talk a little bit about that and then just highlight the differences as we go through. What we're looking for is the target population. We want to make sure we're getting, for drug court specifically, that high risk, high need population. Sometimes that's the hardest, and I know Lisa talks about, making sure that we have the right individuals. It's really important for these problem-solving courts that we do have those individuals, because these are intense programs. You have weekly court appearances, you have conversations with the judge, there is immediate responses to sanctions or, that are coming up with behavior. And if we start to put a low-risk individual into that population and mix them with those individuals that are in those courts, we actually risk making that person worse. I think one of the hardest things that, we try to teach our officers when they come in is a person who maybe comes up as low risk, but is that they're high need. So they have an addiction. We see that they have an addiction. They're looking for the resources for that, but they don't meet that high risk criteria. So having to tell that person, yes, we absolutely understand that you have an addiction and you need that help, but we also don't want to make you worse by putting you in with this population, so you're not appropriate for that court. And that's something that we try to work with our officers, really make sure that the applicant themselves, the attorneys, family members sometimes understand that there are positive things that are going on in that person's life. We try to identify that with that person and then give them those resources. We provide treatment agencies that would be appropriate for this person, link them with some of those services, understanding though that that's something that they can likely do on their own without having to mix them with some of our populations. And so if we can go to the next slide. So when I talk about risk, and I know it's a little bit hard to see on there, so what that top graph is showing you is that is the risk of our regular probation caseload. So on the right, that 60% that you see there, that is our low risk population that has been assessed for regular probation. So the low and then moderate, you're looking at about 92%, 93% of that population in regular probation is assessed at low or moderate risk. 6% and then 0.9%, you can't even see the chart, that's our high and very high risk for regular probation. If I flip that and look at the DRC risk, the area that I've circled, it's up to about 66% that is high or very high risk. And so what that tells me is that we are absolutely getting the right people into these programs. We're doing our assessments effectively, and the people that should be in drug court are in drug court. Now, if you look on the right, there's that 30% that's low risk. And so what that means is it's not that we're accepting anybody that's low risk into the program. What that's doing is telling us that as they come in, there's on average, the programs are about 24 months. So as they come in, they're high risk. When we've given them kind of some of these resources and supports, they're decreasing in that risk. And that's exactly what we want to see. It's probably not as effective if you have someone come in at high risk and remain there. And so when you start to see those moderate and low risk in that drug court program, we're doing what we should be doing with these individuals. If you can go to the next slide. So just a couple highlights of the demographics right now that are in a drug court. So this one is very interesting. So drug court's been around for a long time. We have a lot of data on drug court. And so drug of choice, 2009, I'll just talk about the top three. 53% of individuals that came in. So we always ask a person when they come in, give me your drug of choice. We'll ask for secondary and sometimes third drug of choice, but really we want to highlight what is your drug of choice? 53% at that time were cocaine, 21% were THC, and only 16% was heroin. If you look over at 2020, there is a significant shift. Again, the heroin at 51%, I don't think that surprises anyone, given obviously the conversations that we know about opiates and where we're at with that. However, THC is a 1%. And so you can absolutely see the shift on the drug of choice for the individual that's coming in. I will tell you that over the last couple years, we've seen heroin kind of, again, these are reported from the individual that comes in, but we've seen heroin kind of stands still a little bit. It hasn't really seen that increase. We have started to see increase in cocaine being the primary drug of choice for individuals that have come into the program. We'll continue to watch this, but this is just some information we thought would be interesting for individuals. The next slide talks about the gender shifts. Again, if you look at the difference just in the female population alone over the last 11 years, 23% in 2009 compared to 44%. I don't have a great answer as to why we're seeing that shift. If I did, I would probably be in a different conversation. But I do believe that the more we talk about trauma and the more we understand trauma and the more that we really kind of put out there the resources available for that is where I think you start to see the female population being just more prevalent in this area. Next one. So our treatment alternative court, just real quick on that. It's our mental health court. It has a capacity of 30 at the current time. We have 16 individuals in that program. Again, we saw about a 50% decrease over COVID. The only difference is everybody still goes through the assessment process. This court, really the focus is more on that mental health piece of that. So we're looking at more of that moderate risk individuals as opposed to your high risk criminal thinking. One thing that I do want to make sure everyone's aware is that mental health does not automatically make you high risk. It's the managing of that mental health and making sure that you understand what you're doing with that increases that. So just because you have a mental illness does not mean that you're going to automatically be high risk. And so we understand that. And so we're looking at kind of a little bit different population with our treatment alternative court. The only other difference with this court is that we, instead of doing that substance abuse assessment on individuals, we're going to do a mental health assessment, and that comes from our diagnostic center. Every individual that comes into our TAC court is assessed for mental health needs. Next slide. Veterans Treatment Court. This is our newest court. It started in 2018. As I said before, these programs are about 24 months in length on average. Veterans Court right now has 3 individuals, and I know that seems like a very small number. At the end, we just talked briefly about graduations, and Veterans Court graduated 6 individuals last year, and that puts you right up about that 24-month time frame. So that's where we're trying to see, we see that difference in the population sizes. One of the unique things about Veterans Court, which I think many would know, is that you must be a veteran and you have to be VA eligible. The one thing with VA eligibility is that you have to be above a dishonorable discharge in order to receive services through that. And so that's something that, comes through our assessment process. We're also looking for a moderate to high risk. And again, some of that's just looking at the background of the individuals that are coming in. As you can see up there, we have certain local community resources that are a part of that team, which are different from the other courts, the King County Veterans Assistance Commission, and then the Veterans Treatment Center. Most of the treatment provided from the veterans comes from those agencies as well as Hines VA. And then you can see the gender in that. Next slide. So I'll be biased for just a minute and tell you that what I think really makes these courts work is our probation team. That is not taking away from the judge, the state's attorney, public defender, anyone else, but the day-to-day work that these officers are doing to work with these individuals from day one, I think is really what kind of brings all of that together. So this is just a look at the teams that we have in place. As you can see, the drug court team obviously has more individuals, and that makes sense based off of the population and the size of that court. Next slide. So I just kind of broke down the work for you. I'm not going to talk about all of those, but what I want to highlight is the crisis management piece of that. So what crisis management is, these officers are working 365 days a year, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They have access with their phones. Individuals are contacting them. They are there for people in the evenings, on the weekends. Oftentimes we have to tell them, okay, I need you to shut your phone off. I need you to take a break for a minute, because of that dedication that they have to these people and to the populations that they serve. The relationship, not only with the judge, we talked about before, but the relationship with their probation officers, I think is really what gets a person from starting and just wanting to be part of the program to really seeing those accomplishments and making it through successfully. One of the other things that we talk about are, home visits and drug testings. That's been a huge shift from 2020 because obviously we had to readjust a lot of the things that we were doing in 2020 and look at how do we continue to monitor and supervise this population and work with them when everything else has been shut down. So if you'll go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about the drug testing. As you can see, the huge decrease in 2020 compared to previous years with the amount of drug tests. The slide on the left shows you the differences between just our specialty courts, the number of drug tests that we do, and then our regular probation. Again, our specialty courts far exceed our regular probation caseloads in the drug testing, also letting us know that we have the right population that we need in those courts. So again, 2020, you see the decrease, but I will say that if I look at all of those courts, even with the graduations, there was probably about 100 individuals between all three courts that were supervised during 2020. There were still 4,200 drug tests that were completed on those individuals, understanding that there were still a couple months in there where essentially everything was shut down. So, again, huge kudos to our staff for getting out there and really kind of putting themselves in the positions to really want to help these people and make sure that no one got lost during those shutdowns. And so, so we talked about the grant before, so I want to just touch on the residential treatment and then supportive housing placement, which really is what we call halfway houses. Residential treatment, when we've applied for these grants over the last couple years, the focus has been on residential treatment. As many of you, I'm sure, know, treatment is extremely expensive. Many individuals do not have access to that treatment, or if they do, it's only for a short period of time. So what we try to do is utilize these grant funds to help anybody and everybody who needs it pay for this residential treatment. We do our best to look at insurance first. We then look at the DASA-funded beds, which allows us to, these are state-funded beds. So again, that's not coming out of our grant dollars, that's coming out of beds from the state. We have a wonderful, or we're getting a new treatment person who really is pushing to these agencies to really get our individuals into these inpatient treatment facilities to get them the resources that they need. When that doesn't work and when somebody needs treatment immediately, then we're going to go ahead and use our grant funds. If you look at inpatient treatment, we had 68 individuals that were placed in 2020. Even compared to 2019 with 29 individuals, you can just see the impact that COVID has had on the addictions and that population. The second one, the treatment alternative court is also listed there. What I will highlight is that when we look at our treatment alternative court, there's a lot of dual diagnosis that happens. So we're placing individuals into a mental health and substance abuse agencies. And so not all of those individuals through our mental health court are in need of those inpatient services. You see that primarily more with our drug court. On the left, you'll see 80% in 2020 of the drug court population was assessed as needing inpatient treatment. We don't do those assessments. We identify individuals and then we're going to refer them out to those agencies. So these agencies are assessing people as needing that inpatient treatment. It's not just us saying, hey, I really think you could use inpatient, go ahead and go. And so I think it's a huge, just to look at the number of people that are coming in that are in need of those services. Coupled with that is the supportive housing placement or these halfway houses. So what we have found is that, and again, I don't think it should come as a surprise, drug court always talks about, or all of the courts, people, places, and things, right? So if you want to really work with somebody, we send somebody to inpatient treatment, we give them that 28 days, we get them out of their community, out of their home environments, and really let them focus on themselves, skill building, things like that. And then what happens after that 28 days is they go right back to that same place. There's the same place that they live, the same people that they've been around, they're back into that same routine, and we start the cycle all over again. So what we identified was that halfway houses will assist in that transition from inpatient treatment as a step down. So that gives a person better opportunities to succeed and use those skills in kind of a real life situation, as opposed to just here, we'll see how this goes. Those cost money, as everybody knows. And so the grants that we have applied for over the last 2 years, we have wrote in there to help us pay for the first 2 weeks of treatment for these individuals at the halfway house. The reason is that when you go to these halfway houses, again, everyone would love for them just to be funded and there be no problem, but that's not the case. And so when you go to these halfway houses, you pay every 2 weeks. They also require a person to be engaged in employment during that time. So I'm a person, I'm just coming out of inpatient treatment. Now I've got to go to a place that I've never been before with people that I don't know, and I have to find a job, and I've got this court program that I'm still working on. It's a lot for a person. And so what we try to do with that 2 weeks is say to them, listen, we'll help you out on that 2 weeks. We'll be able to provide that. So really what your focus is, transition, get yourself a job, don't worry about that money. I will tell you there are individuals that it takes a little bit longer, and each of our teams staffs those cases to see if an additional 2 weeks is there. We're not looking to pay for everybody all the time, but we are looking to make sure that we give everyone the best advantage. So from the supportive housing placement, you can see the increase over 2019 and 2020 for those that we placed in halfway houses. Next slide. I think one of the things that I just want to kind of highlight for you guys is to let you know that we would love to do all of this on our own. That's not possible, and we understand that. And so again, I've talked about the support of, of the board that we have from that, and then all of the agencies around Kane County that really want to support not only the members of our courts, but then also just the probation department. So these are some of the agencies that we have utilized in 2020. One of the things for the sneaker hearts that I want to talk about is I think sometimes we forget. So we require all of these individuals, if capable, to get employment prior to graduation. And what I think we take for granted is that if I have to go do an interview somewhere, I know what I have. I've got my suit that I'm wearing. I have all of my necessities. These individuals don't have that. And not necessarily that they need to have that, but we teach a person, we skill build, we let them know you need to dress for the position. And sometimes people come in and they just say, I don't have that. I don't have shoes for this. Or the only shoes I have are the ones that I wear every single day. So these organizations really help us provide that. What we do with this is we provide these things as incentives to individuals as well, not only from a need standpoint, but we also take a look at that person and, we give them that incentive of here's a new pair of shoes. And to us, that may seem kind of weird, but to an individual who maybe hasn't bought a new pair of shoes in 6 months, a year, 2 years, and has completely worn out the soles of those shoes, that is a huge thing for them. Transportation is big for people. So when we talk about these coat drives that we do, sometimes people don't like accepting that. And so we basically just say, here's another coat for you. And some of this is based on when our officers are out in the field and they're identifying, how are these people coming out of the house? When they're waiting at bus stops, what are we seeing? So a person may say, no, I don't need a coat, I'm good. But over the course of a winter, we've never seen that person wearing a coat. So really what the officers are doing is they're saying, just take this, because I think this will be helpful. And if you don't use it, you can give it to somebody else. And really just kind of trying to use what the community's been able to give us and give back to others. So the next slide is just a little bit more on our community outreach that we've done over the last year as well. I think we talk about can you do the next slide? Sorry. So the TAC court receives grant funds from the NAMI. And so this was one of it's hard to see that basket now, but the trunk is full of baskets. And what we did was June of last year, so right at the beginning of the pandemic, we went out to our TAC participants through these funds and we gave them food, toilet paper, which was a huge commodity at that time, but food and toilet paper, gift cards that allow them to get medication from Walgreens and CVS, because again, we forget sometimes that what we take for granted, they have a hard time getting sometimes. And medication, especially with our mental health population, is so incredibly important. And so we were able to provide that to the individuals last year. Thanksgiving baskets were donated out to 10 families through funds that we received through the Specialty Court Foundation. And then probably one of my favorites, and we're going to talk about graduations, and then I promise I'll be done, is the wrapping ceremony that all of our veterans go through who successfully complete our vet court. So what this is Quilts of Valor is a community organization that volunteers from around the United States make quilts. And each area has a unit that kind of makes quilts and will donate this. Any veteran is eligible, not just from our program, but any veteran is eligible for it. But what they've joined with our court, and anybody who is successful from Veterans Court and who has not already received a quilt is given a quilt during the graduation ceremony. It's unique. No quilt is the same because as they go through that, they're making these for individuals that come up. And so if you have not already, and I'm going to plug all of our graduations in a minute, but if you have not already attended one of the vet court graduations, I highly encourage you to do that. The difference is it's really neat to watch some of that. So if you do the next slide, which is the last slide, we're going to talk about just the graduations and determining success. So when I came up initially, we just talked about, the success of the programs and those graduations and seeing people at the graduations. And that makes sense. But what I want to make sure we also remember is that it's not always the graduations. So success is going to look different to everybody. And that's kind of what keeps our officers going day to day. Not everybody that comes into the program graduates. In fact, I think at this point, about 60% are graduating. And that may not seem like a high number, but when you go back to that risk population of that very high and high risk and realize that for 2.5, sometimes 3 years, we've been able to keep this person in the court system without committing new offenses, successful in treatment, working, maintaining employment and sober, that's a huge success. And so even if I can do that for a person for 18 months and perhaps something comes up and they don't get to graduate, they've still been successful in that time. We try to talk to the officers about, an individual who's had a child that is not addicted to drugs. That's a huge success for us. Individuals who have their first home. We do milestones and we give out, incentives to people for things like that. Again, for getting their first home, you'd be surprised how many people just have never had that before. And that's a huge accomplishment for them. Getting a driver's license. So our officers are working with individuals to figure out, what do I need to do to get my driver's license so I can continue working my job and not rely on public transportation and not rely on some of these things that I've done before. And so then when we look at the graduation rates, overall, since its inception, drug court's got 879 graduations. Again, October, we had a 20-year graduation. So drug court's been around for quite a long time. TAC and vet court, you can kind of see those graduation rates. And then we talk a little bit about just what happened in 2020. So despite that pandemic, people are still graduating and they're still being successful in that program. Each of our graduations, as I said, I would encourage you to attend. If you haven't already, I can ensure that our coordinators will send those links out to you. I think one of the other highlights of 2020 has been the use of YouTube and the use of Zoom. And so where, some of these vet court and treatment alternative court graduations people may not have been aware of, this allows for anybody to view those. And I would really encourage all of you to log on and kind of see the journey that these individuals go through and the uniqueness of each of those graduations. Any questions?
I guess I just have a quick question. For each of the courts, you mentioned a high risk, high need. How do you define high risk?
So great. So we do a risk assessment on every individual that comes in. And so that risk assessment will let us identify the areas of high risk and overall high risk, and then some of the areas that we need to work on.
Could you give me a couple examples of what would be considered high risk?
Sure.
Is it like
So when we do our risk assessment, there is 11 different areas on our risk assessment that we do for all of probation. We're looking at criminal history, we're looking at family, we're looking at the employment, their criminal thinking is a big one. Attitudes and skills section is another area that we look at. We look at the history of drug use and how it impacts then the things that they're doing. So we ask, it's usually about an 1.5-hour interview where we're going through with individuals. It's a validated risk assessment tool that we use. And so each of our officers are trained in that. They go through that question. Then that'll get scored at the end. That'll allow the officer to determine an overall risk, and then it also allows them to identify within that overall risk the specific areas that they really should be targeting and focusing on for the person.
So it's a state mandated risk assessment enforcement tool that's been validated for this population. And so we were mandated to use it through the Illinois courts, and it's been statistically proven to be predictive for the likelihood to commit crime. So when we talk about risk, what we're talking about is risk of reoffending. So it's your likelihood on a actuarial table for your personality type to go on to commit further crimes. So that's what we're measuring when we talk about risk.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding the presentation? And I guess I'd just like to thank you as well. And, we see how the wraparound services are so vital and important and, help these people continue on. And, kudos to everybody involved. It's remarkable to see, the amount of people who are able to go through this and just thank you for what you do. Great.
Madam
Thank
Chair
you.
Gums, I just have a comment.
Yes, please go ahead, Ms. Gums.
I just want to thank everybody for their hard work in this program. I've been involved with the addiction on a personal level for over 20 years now. As board members, when I speak to folks in my community, they, if they're willing to listen to my long-winded conversations, when we speak to business owners, I often find that one of the biggest obstacles for folks in these programs is getting a job that they can actually pay their rent and buy food. So when I speak to business owners, I'm like, take that risk, hire that person with a felon who's in the treatment program. Because there's nothing that works harder against these folks than not being able to have the dignity to pay your rent bill or to put food on your table. So as a board member myself, when I speak to folks, I encourage them to do those things. They're scary as a business owner, but ultimately it helps you guys do what you're supposed to be doing and gives them the dignity to go out and put food on the table and be able to pay rent. Also, you brought up something that has been strong for me. And, I would also like to see, and I've spoken to our legislators about this, we automatically suspend licensing. I would prefer that folks get their restricted driver's permits so they can get to the drug test, so they can get to the job, so they can get to court, as opposed to automatic suspensions or automatic revocations. That's going to help you guys. It's going to help the community. And overall, it's going to help the person that needs help the most. So those are just some things that, when I talk to people in the community, I like to bring them to the forefront and encourage others to do the same.
Great. Thank you, Mrs. Gums. Those are really excellent points.
Copy
all right.
question.
Mr. Copey, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question was in regards to the portion of the of your explanation in regards to the preferred choice of drug. I did not quite understand. I thought I heard two statistics in regards to the use of marijuana. One was a minimal, and then the second one seemed quite large. Could we go back to that section? I do not have the slides in front of me, and I apologize for that.
No, absolutely. So when we looked at the drug of choice, now again, I just want to kind of reiterate, we asked this question at the time of entry, and so this is what's been identified by that individual. So speaking to your marijuana, your THC, in 2009, the individuals that were in the drug court program, 21% of those that came into the program identified marijuana as their primary drug of choice. That was in comparison to the 53% cocaine and then heroin. If I flip to 2020, which is 11 years later, only 1% of the individuals in our program have identified marijuana as their primary drug of choice. And so we're definitely seeing that shift.
Oh, thank you.
Sure.
And then another question. You ask the individual what drug did they begin as using and experimenting with to end up in a situation where they are?
That's not a question that we ask at the time of application. I know where you're coming at with that, and I think it'd be really interesting information just to kind of when we get to know the person. But generally, once they're in and they're applying, we're really kind of focused on what is their current drug of choice, and then how do we best assist them at that time.
Right. My concern is obvious. I am not an advocate of marijuana use or the wholesale of the product and the growing of it within our communities. And if there is a connection, I think we should all know it. But if there isn't, then you don't feel that it is an issue. We'd like to know that also.
I understand that. Yeah, that's absolutely. And I think that's something to be, that we can take into consideration as we continue to have conversations with these individuals.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Copey. Okay, thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emily. So that was Emily Saylor again. So she's one of two directors in the probation office. And I will just finalize her presentation, as it were, or just ending on this note in that in court services, our goal is recidivism reduction. And so when we talk about high risk, high needs, we're talking about high risk or propensity, likelihood to commit further crimes. And so that one slide, Emily showed that the drug court is very successful in taking people who are high risk and also substance abusing and bringing them down to low risk. So we're treating the substance abuse because the goal is that the substance abusing is what is driving the criminality. And she touched on a little bit. Sometimes we find that there's multiple underlying issues going on and they're self-medicating using the drugs to disguise, to cover up mental health issues and other issues. So everything that we do is driven by risk. So this program really only admits high risk people because we're really trying to focus on eliminating, reducing criminal activity in the community. So if there are any other questions, like I said, I have no resolutions this week or this month, and I appreciate you.
Thank you. Mrs. Austin, I'm sorry, I apologize. I know you were also going to
Right,
presenting
so-
the judicial, the Juvenile Justice Center
Yeah,
report.
absolutely. So Mike Davis will not be coming to these meetings anymore, just in order for brevity for the agenda. So his reports are on file. If anybody has any questions, I'm very happy to speak to any of those.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any questions. Okay, so we will move on to our circuit clerk. Good morning, Ms. Barretto.
Good morning. My report's on file, and if anybody has any questions regarding it. Also, I would just like to say that we have been implementing some new computers. And which has been a long time coming, trying to get 2018 Tyler in. And then another one of our systems, which I tried to describe it, nobody would understand anyway. But the problem is that what we do at the circuit clerk's office, we rely on Tyler, we rely on their product, we rely on IT, we rely on, and what we do at the circuit clerk's office is try to make it work for all of the judicial partners that are using the systems, to make sure that everything is correct, that all the forms are correct in there. And sometimes that can be really cumbersome because they change on a dime. 1 minute it's this way, and then at the end of the day we get a new legislative update. But we are implementing 2 new systems the end of the month. I would like everybody to keep in mind, we did not create these systems. We're making them work for all of you. So if there's any issues with them, we need to know so that we can make sure everything's working for all the prosecutors, state's attorney's office, et cetera. So, and then the other thing is, I do have an ordinance on the agenda today. It's just basically a housekeeping issue. I don't know if the state's attorney would like to discuss it any further.
I guess I'll entertain a motion and a second to discuss ordinance.
Leonard moves.
Sanchez seconds.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Burrow, go ahead.
It's just a housekeeping issue. It was originally a resolution and we needed to correct it to state the correct information, but that's all it is. It's already been in place following the state statutes.
And if there's any question for the state's attorney's office, ASA Brady is on the line as she's the one who drafted this and can answer those questions.
So basically, the fees have already been in existence. This is just clarifying.
Right, right.
Okay.
Nothing's changing as far as the fees go or anything like that.
Okay, any comments or questions? No? Okay, so go ahead and entertain a roll call, please.
Brown,
Yes.
Gums,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Davis,
Davis, yes.
Molina.
Melina, yes. Okay, thank you. Okay, that passes, and then I'll go on to finance, it looks like. Okay, next item on our agenda is our Merit Commission.
Good morning, Todd Zeese with the Merit Commission. We conducted our first testing last night at Mooseheart for the corrections officers. We had about 31 applicants. Over half of them passed the tests. We are going to be doing another test there in July for corrections, just to keep up with our numbers. And we're also going to be holding a patrol officers test on May 5th at Mooseheart. If you remember, we changed our locations to make it more safer, easy access, and right outside the front windows, we're able to watch the eagles. So it's pretty interesting. So everything's going well. Like I said, our report's on file. If you have any questions, I can answer them.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Zeezer, the Merit Commission? Okay, here and seeing none, thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, last item on our agenda is our coroner's report. Coroner Russell is training with some of his employees today, so he wasn't able to be here. But the report is on file if anybody has any comments or questions. All right, this is going smoothly, everyone. Okay, any new business for the will of the committee? None. All right, so I'll take a motion in a second to place the reports on file.
Leonard
Gums will move.
moves.
Mr. Leonard moves and Ms. Gum seconds. We'll take a roll call on that.
Brown,
Yes.
Gums,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Davis,
Davis, yes.
Molina.
Molina, yes. All right. And we have no need for executive session today. So I'll entertain a motion. Hello?
Kobe, new business, please. Kobe, business.
Because it's paying wages to Florida first.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Sanchez moves. Brown second.
Davis, second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next month.